Good morning, everybody.
Good
I'm
morning.
glad. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, good. All right. I'm glad to see the faces who've been able to log on this morning. And we're going to be talking about sickle cell and relationships, and um, especially in the context of, how sickle cell impacts relationships, different considerations. There are things that are true for relationships in general. And so that's pretty foundational. Um, and having that foundation supports the particular um, concerns or issues that we need to address in the sickle cell community, in the world of relationships. So this is an overview. Of course, relationships could be a course unto itself, a college course, but we're going to spend time on some key points to develop wholesome, quality relationships that can work best for us in our need, in our circumstance. So we're going to talk about some of the principles for healthy relationships. And I do want to make a disclaimer that I am not a licensed therapist or a counselor, but I have committed many, many years of my life in personal development, education, and from a variety of reliable sources, including formal classroom training and research. I've done evaluations, lectures, and participated in relationship and self-development discussions and workshops. But more than anything else, it's the evidence of my own personal experience, what I've learned, garnered, and developed over the years that I want to share with you. A lot of it is not new information. We're pulling all these things together and reiterating the importance of certain points. So to go right to it, we'll start off with some key points for any relationship. And when we're talking about relationships, I'm talking about family, friends, acquaintances, coworkers, supervisors, and family and romantic relationships. So we're talking about all types of relationships. The foundation for any is respect. And so when we talk about respect, I'll just say a few things. I would like to back up and say that I want to make this very participative. Everyone has experiences that we can all glean and grow from. So I definitely want your input, your share, your what you've learned on any of these principles that might edify and enhance us. And of course, anything that's you have any questions about, like Antoine said, you can just take off your mic and ask, or put them in the chat and we'll address it. So we're going to be interactive throughout the whole presentation. So I'm going to be playing more of the role of a facilitator than a lecturer, hopefully. So with that, does anybody have any thoughts of what comes to your mind in the context of respect and relationships? And maybe maybe we can start from the opposite and say, what does disrespect look like? And maybe that would clarify what respect looks like more.
I have something or an example, I think, maybe, as disrespect. Just when like you're in a relationship with a significant other and they don't understand like what you go through. So they don't understand that like 1 minute you could be perfectly fine, the next minute you could be in pain. And then basically just saying, oh, you're acting like a baby, or it can't hurt that much. Like it's just a little pain in your legs, or it's just a little, you don't need to go to the ER for that. Like just downplaying like how you were feeling and, you know, your state of mind and things like that, or people telling you that, you know, your sickle cell isn't valid, or it's not a, basically just saying that, you know, you're acting like a child. Like there's no way you can go from being perfectly fine 1 minute and the next minute you just don't feel good. And I feel like people should understand that first. I honestly feel like when it comes to like significant other relationships, I feel like people should come off who have sickle cell and just say it right, like straightforward. Like the first thing you should say, because you can tell if that person really cares about you or not, if they, by the way they react, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that is an example of disrespect. And in relationships, part of respect is actually believing what you say. And we get, we could even include in relationships with our caregivers or our providers, our healthcare people, because we get this disrespect from that by not believing us. And where we have, of course, relationships, we have to consider we have a limited amount of control, more of ourselves. We have, the access to be an influencer to a degree. And so what we have total control over is how we respond and what kind of decisions we make within the context of relationships. So with the example that you gave, Jackie, that kind of disrespect is almost on the level of abuse, because it's actually anytime somebody minimizes you, your thoughts, your feelings, your needs, that's totally disrespectful. And so the opposite would be respect, where someone is actually willing to accept true what you say. They're respecting your voice, honoring what you have to say. They're, acknowledging that you own those and only you can speak for you. And so your credibility, when it's threatened like that, is definitely disrespectful. So respect is being heard, being listened to, being believed, being acknowledged, not being talked down to, being. So I'll leave it at that. I want to see if anybody else had any thoughts on respect.
Judith?
Yes, Judith.
Actually, you already said what I was going to say. I think one of the key to respect is listening. So if someone is talking or sharing some information, just, be quiet and listen, and then, try to repeat back what that person said.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Keep going, Judy. I have to get a delivery. One quick second.
Go ahead, Judith.
And then, repeat back what the person said. Also, it's really hard too, because I've been in situations where when they just can't really care or have real concern about how you're doing or wanting to help, where basically it's a situation where they're based, disrespect, but they don't really care, first of all.
Yeah.
So instead of wanting to help, they'll come out, oh, well, you're needy, or you're this, you're that, or the other. But basically, they just really don't want to help.
Yeah.
And I've learned now over the years to, pick up on this, like what Maya Angelou says: when somebody tells you who they are, believe them the first time. Because otherwise, anyone who has any type of care or concern, they won't do
Yeah.
that.
It's
Do you feel
really
like some
hard.
people?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
People do just like to get, I don't know if this makes sense, but like to get points, like to just say like, oh, I was there for her, or I was there for whoever when she needed me or when they needed me. But then they use that against you when they need something. They kind of play it off and be like, oh, well, I was there for you when you were sick in the hospital and I didn't have to be. So they kind of use that to basically kind of hold it over your head to make you feel guilty, like you're a burden to them.
Yeah. That's that's definitely not respecting you, in the sense that it's a form of manipulation.
Mhm.
And giving should be pure expecting nothing in return from the heart, unless it's agreed in advance that it's going to be a transactional type of relationship. That would be in advance. In the situation that you described about someone not believing you and understanding, I think in relationships, romantic relationships, any relationship where someone is going to be play a significant role in your life, to get part of getting the respect you need is disclosing and being clear. And we're going to talk about disclosing near the end, but that's a huge, huge important factor, to know when and what and how to disclose about self. So that can actually save a lot of time and trouble, because if you disclose in the beginning, you'll get a response. You can make a decision before you're invested in the relationship about whether this person is going to add stress to your life, which is going to, make you more vulnerable to pain episodes and triggers. So I'm going to move to the next.
Do you have time for another?
Yeah.
I was just gonna, personally for me, being in a marriage, one of the things that always gets told to me before I got married was, it's going to take work.
Yeah.
Sometimes what people don't realize is, what that person that's already married is giving you advice of is going to take a lifetime of work. It's not going to be, so you can't work on this for 5 years and then think it's all going to be great.
Right.
I bring it up is because I feel like we're talking about this whole disrespect to respect thing. I think it's human nature for people to forget in relationships specifically that this person that you're teaming up with didn't grow up with you, didn't grow up in the same environment as you, and probably had completely different customs and cultural aspects to how they were taught and educated. And I bring it up because I feel like in terms of disrespect, I feel like to an extent it could be that, but not as detrimental. But there's an idea that we don't realize how to just understand somebody's opinion and take it for what it is, accept it. We want to constantly push them to compromise to us, opposed to us finding a compromise by being neutral. So if I have a specific way I want to put something, and my wife has a different way she wants to put something, sometimes my natural thought is, well, if I feel like my way is wrong, my way is right, I want her to adopt my way, when it's not that necessary for that to be the case. And I feel like what I'm saying in a nutshell is accepting one's feelings, opinions, and customs, rather than trying to tell them or at least propose that their customs are incorrect about something. And I feel like that coincides with the whole idea. It's like, look, you're 36, I'm 38. Your experience is not that far off of mine. So I'm not person to say that what your experience is worse than mine, or it's not at the same level as mine. So disrespect to me, I feel like, is me saying to my wife, nah, I don't accept how you feel. I need you to feel how I feel. And I think that is definitely a detriment to relationships as a whole.
And there is a connection, and actually acceptance is one, the third principle that I'm going to touch on after respect. But some of these things are really interwoven and overlap, because part of that whole respect thing is a level of acceptance. And respect, you're honoring, part of respect is honoring someone else, right, and having yourself honored and your personhood. You don't want to be made felt like you're not good enough, or that you need to change, or now in an intimate relationship and in a boss, employee, there's some negotiation, but it's still through respect, not put downs and all these other digs and manipulation. So there's a level of acceptance, and where you have more personal relationships, especially romantic relationships or friendships, you really want to show up, and we're going to talk about that too. Do you? and from the get-go. Like if you wait later, it's like, who is this? Who is this person? You gotta show up from the get-go.
Yeah.
And you don't want to make them feel that they're not good enough. You don't want to allow somebody to make you feel like you're not good enough.
For sure.
And you want to embrace someone with who they are, as long as they're not trampling on you. You know, if who they are is abusive and controlling, you know, that's a whole nother thing.
For sure.
But you have to let them be them, and then negotiate things that you have to work on with decisions that involve both of you. With this disrespect, we have to embrace the reality that it's our decision to either change our expectations or grieve and let go of what we can't have or what they are not capable of giving, or move on. You know, we have to realize we have that control. We have that decision, and we don't need, because we have sickle cell, to feel desperate in any way.
Shirley, can I add one piece to that as well?
Yeah, go for it.
In terms of disrespect, a big part of it, especially with everything that we've been going on with the Me Too movement and everything, is personal space. I think a huge sign of disrespect is not, you know, respecting people's boundaries, their personal space, just kind of go up in their face or doing whatever you want, feeling like you're entitled to something. And I think it happens especially in marriages where people have grown with each other. They're like, oh, I could do this freely and, you know, without having to really ask for permission. So I think that's a sign of disrespect that sometimes goes unnoticed and it's kind of either like brushed aside or whatever. But I think it's something that we should talk about and address in terms of the realities of it, is that sometimes, you know, you should, if you're feeling uncomfortable, you should always feel free to express yourself on that end.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. The input has been wonderful so far, and it really draws a bigger picture. And
Okay, I just want to say one thing too, that what you said, Shirley, about the acceptance, I believe that that's respectful. When you accept people's positions on various topics and issues, that's respect. When you disrespect is when you can't make the concession and say, hey, okay, I understand, I recognize your position. You know, I may not agree with it, but I respect what you're saying, you know, and that to me, you know, it's like you said, it's like accepting that, you know, because nobody wants to feel like, you know, they're what they feel and what they think isn't regarded. And so when you're trying to impose your will or your thoughts about how it should be or the way you think it should go, well, you know, it's all good. I understand that, but you don't have to agree with that. And that's another element of respect.
Absolutely. One of the things that Antoine said that's really, I think, valuable for us to remember, that if we're in relationships with other people who do not have self, clear out time just to have that conversation, to really lend clarity, and maybe have him do some research, look at some videos, things like that, to really understand what it is to experience a pain episode or any of the secondary issues with sickle cell. Yes, Judith, you have your mute on.
I'm not, just real quick, I'm not going to keep it long, but I just wanted to go back to what Antoine was saying, and I believe that was Nadina. Was that Nadina? Nadina. I think a lot of the problems that people have is around opinion, not respecting someone else's opinion, because that has to do with their perspective. And their perspective has to do with how they're seeing things, their life, their experience. It's another thing if something is a fact, You know, I'm in one group that's a problem. I tell you, the people now, you know, a fact is a fact, you know, okay, period. But it, you know, sometimes if someone has an opinion, it may not be quite like yours. It's nice when it is, but that's part of diversity, and you can learn a lot from that.
Right.
As a teacher, that's one of my rules. You know, you don't argue, especially for group work. You don't argue with someone about their opinion. You know, so that's just. Otherwise, I'd have groups fighting all the time.
Right. Right. It's just politics and religion is a perfect example where it just doesn't make sense because you make people dig their heels in deeper when you argue against their position, especially if they're strong or hold strongly to a certain view. So you just have to acknowledge the difference, and it's okay. They're entitled to have that
Now, the
opinion.
problem is when people are arguing about a fact. Now that can be a real, you know, like COVID and all of that with science. Now, that's a problem.
Right. And there is we'll talk a little bit about that, and it's about ownership and taking responsibility. And so we'll touch on that a little bit because we have the integration of these principles really are there. If you have to trust people to be able to do what they say they're going to do, to be honest, their integrity, what they say, what they do, what they think, and how they act are not contradictory. Now we're all imperfect human beings, so I'm speaking for the most part that defines them. We all kind of can miss the mark here and there, but in the essence of their being is one that you can trust. You know, in any relationship that you want to embrace and hold into your inner circle, people who have influence on your emotions, on your everyday life, or even occasional life. You want to be able to have an established trust. And then you have to be able to respectfully call people out when there's some kind of trust issue comes up. Because if you wait, then there's building up hostility and tension and resentment and stress. And the possibility of recovering diminishes as things build up and time goes by. It's never too late, but the sooner you kind of nip it in the bud and address some things, especially to do with trust, in a respectful way, the better it will be for the relationship. Because it's not, when you talk about relationships, it's a we-ness, it's a us-ness, whether it's your sister, your friend, your partner, your coworker. So we want to think in terms of the big picture of what's in the best interest of all concerned. And you never want to compromise what's in your best interest. Not saying that you want to only have your way, but if it's going to diminish you, your value, if it's causing you to compromise significantly on some of your core values, then that's something that you really want to examine yourself and say, do I really want to do this? Because I think it could be quite painful and hurtful. So trusting someone is really, really important. And being able to be trustworthy yourself, to do what you say, be who you are. Anybody have any thoughts about trust? We have to, especially with sickle cell, be able to trust that our words can be believed if we're in pain. They trust us that we can make some decisions about what we can do and what we can't do. If they want to go hiking and we're feeling like that's risky today, that we need to be able to be trusted, and we need to be able to trust the person that they won't have resentment or hold that against us. But honesty, of course, is a major player in trust. And they overlap, because if people just disrespect you, it's hard to trust them. Trust them with your heart, trust them with your care, or in a whole bunch of other levels. Any comments or thoughts, questions?
that's a good point that you just made. Like if people are disrespecting you, that's kind of the number one thing. You're not going to be able to trust them with other things as well.
Yeah.
So I had never really thought of it quite that way. So that's a good point.
So then let's see, we'll talk about, and we touched on this a little bit earlier. So, but acceptance of others and acceptance of ourselves is not the same thing as resignation. You know, you just give up and just be a doormat and let anything go. That's not what I'm talking about when I say acceptance. Acceptance has many dimensions in relationships. And one of the things we talked about in terms of respect is accepting the person. But at the same time, acceptance doesn't mean allowing mistreatment, abuse, and that kind of thing. But accepting in a respectful way the person for who they are, you know, tall, short, light, dark, sickle cell, whatever. It's just accepting. If it's not appropriate for you, if it's not a good dynamic, you accept that too. And that frees you to let go. Acceptance is meaning not resisting reality. It doesn't mean being a doormat or anything. It means be in touch with what the reality is. So if, for example, I have a friend who's in a very volatile marriage, and she's like, I can't take this. I'm not going to put up with this mess. And the problem is that that's not true. She can't really do. He's not changing. She can't change him. So for her, acceptance doesn't mean that she just takes it lying down. It means like accept the reality that he's this. Then you can be free and calm yourself down to make the appropriate decisions or have an appropriate response that's more self-honoring, where you're not allowing your emotions to be swung all over the world in a painful way because you refuse to accept the reality that this person is not giving you the kind of treatment that you need. So you need to accept, like surrender to the reality. Okay, the truth is I'm not being treated right. That's acceptance. Then you can say, now what am I going to do about it? When you accept something, that frees you. It gives the paradox of opening the door for you to make some decisions that honor yourself.
Question for that. I heard the term response earlier. I mean, definitely there's a lot of levels to acceptance. My curiosity in this respect is, how do we understand, or better said, how do I say it like this? With the response, something happened before the response. And what normally happens before a response is the approach. And I feel like there's a lot of situations, whether it be in marriage, whether it be in the hospital, whether it be just encountering somebody in the street or whatever, because I'm a salesperson. So, I mean, Robert can kind of test this as well. He's on the call. We've got to continuously cold call people or approach them in a manner that's going to give them this sense of security between our conversation from the get-go, that they'll listen to us. And I think that happens to be something that deters the acceptance almost immediately when you don't have the right approach to a circumstance. And I understand completely from the sickle cell perspective. Does everybody hear me well, or is it? Does everybody hear me clearly? Or am I coming in cut off? Does everybody hear me?
You're good.
Okay, cool. So yeah, and I just wanted to bring that fact up. Like, I think that's some of the toughest. Yeah, I'm still unstable. Okay, I got to give myself a little time then. Internet connection is not. I gotta do something. But I'll go ahead.
No, I said I hear you just fine.
Okay. Gotcha. I was just curious to just to kind of to have the conversation circulate around the approach and how that can be helpful. Because if I'm going through a crisis, it's really hard for me to manage the emotions and try not to be so sensitive to the moment. Does that make sense? Uh-oh. Let's see here.
So we're not going to get it right. The key is to have the right heart. And so you can come and not be prideful and arrogant and say, you know what, I messed up. Let me rewind the tape and come back, you know. But when emotions are charged, so you just like your emotions, you triggers to the and some triggers, something that reminds us of something that was very upsetting from the past or whatever. But the reaction and the response are two different things. So we want to be more responsive, and that means just trying to be more mature and thoughtful and take our time in giving any kind of feedback or interacting. If you're on the edge, it's probably saying, you know what, I need a little space, a little downtime to process and collect thoughts. So that I'm just making a distinction there between reacting and responding. And I just really think it's crucially important to understand that acceptance is not resignation and being a doormat. Acceptance means telling yourself the truth, looking at things as they really are, and then working from there. Accepting yourself, accepting that, you know, we have sickle cell and that's okay. It's just like some people, and we do the best we can with what we have to work with. So we maximize and we pull out our best selves with that. And so we want to give that same respect to other people as long as they're not being cruel or abusive or disrespectful. And when we accept that we still have choices, that we don't have to stay in a relationship. We can accept the person for who they are, but we'll talk more about that in the distance in a little while about where you position people in your life, depending on what kind of dynamic you have. Any questions or thoughts on acceptance of self and others?
Wait, I'm kind of lost. Are we talking about acceptance for like when we're going through hospital care and all that, or are we just talking about acceptance in like our personal lives and with sickle cell?
Well, in any situation, let's say I was in the hospital last month and I had a hospitalist who was just so not good for me, so out of tune with, I don't think he had any knowledge about sickle cell, and it was just a fiasco. So, okay, that's the reality. I had to accept that this doctor did not know what he was doing. So by me accepting it, it cleared my head enough to take the next step. Okay, give me the charge nurse, give me the case manager, give me the hospital advocate, because I can't talk to this doctor. I accept the fact that I have no influence and no control and no persuasion over this doctor who is giving me the opposite of good care. I have to accept that he's not the one for me. And then from there, I can make good decisions, even in pain, better decisions than if I just get mad and try to cuss him out, because he's just going to get uglier. So the best thing for me to do is accept, okay, this doctor does not understand. He doesn't know what he's doing. I need to, so what are my choices? So when you get to acceptance, you have the paradox of choice. instead of just trying to force the doctor to be something that he's not. Does that help at all, or
Yeah.
Judith?
I get you. I'm following you. It's just in the concept of acceptance, we also don't want to settle for less either. I think that's one thing, is having a certain understanding with what we have. It is going to be a matter of understanding there's a certain amount of I'm gonna use the word ignorance, but I don't want to use the negative side of ignorance, because they say ignorance is bliss for a reason. If you don't know what's going down, you can't blame somebody for being ignorant to a situation. It's not like they're purposely ignorant.
Right.
But
in the example I gave of myself, the doctor, I tried to educate him, but when I saw that he had his own agenda that had nothing to do with my wellness, I had to accept that and move on and try to find some help, somebody who could help me.
I understand that portion, because that's the idea of, like, when you get fed up and then frustrations overtake your ability to communicate what best is for you to stay in that sense of calmness. It gives you an opportunity to think, okay, well, we can't critical think if we're too frustrated. That's just the hardest thing to do in life, is I'm frustrated, this dude or this woman don't know nothing. Now I'm just going to get mad at the situation, opposed to saying, okay, let me channel this energy towards what are the more effective ways for me to get the right outcome for myself. And if you're not in a calm state of mind, by accepting, I get it totally.
Yeah. And we're not going to get it right all the time. I don't think I wasn't upset, but reeling it in and just kind of like, okay, I got to use this energy to direct it to what's going to work for me. What do I need right now? And it's not him. So what can I do? And so we're not going to get it right. We're going to have triggers, but the key on all of these things is to just continue to practice them, to be mindful and practice, because we'll get better and becomes more of who we are the more we start to actually experience these principles by practicing them. And we'll just because we don't get it right, we don't throw in the towel. Just keep trying and you get better. It's like anything else, sports or whatever you do. It takes practice, and that means doing it over and over until you and getting better and better at it.
Yeah.
All right, the time is flying. The clear intention is pretty cut and dry. It means that we want to be clear and specific about what we're experiencing. So it's kind of like with Judith's situation again, I would say to set aside the time in a new relationship, especially a romantic relationship or a friendship relationship, or even like me, I met some first cousins when I was 60 something. And so we need to, if you're going to be around them and spend time, you want to be intentional and clear about what you need, what you want, what your situation is. If you're going to be there on vacation, because we never know when we might end up in a pain episode. And so you just want to be clear about your intentions and don't hide it. Have a way and practice on your own or with a friend, role play about how to be clear about your intentions, what you need, what your capacities are at different times and hours, and how they can help.
I think that's an important thing to continue to preach as much as possible, because I feel like the idea around practice, sometimes depending on how much you do it, can make people feel as though you're a little OCD. And some people don't look at folks that are in that state of mind as a comfortable environment for them. But it's like, it's a matter of me, because that's the hardest thing to do, I think. And just in life in general, it's just, we practice it a couple of times, and by nature, we feel like, all right, that's enough. That's all I need to really do. But it's that circumstance where if you don't continue to do that, obviously you have an intention for something, but the follow through is always going to be skewed. It's like trying to do a presentation and not really having a PowerPoint to help you get back on track. That's the same thing that we have to do constantly, because that's the hardest thing for us to get to do for this organization. It's like get people that are in this community to just follow through with us. We're not asking you for 30 days a month, 365 days a year. We're asking you for 2 days out of the week or 2 days out of the month, just to practice this with us, get this information and educate yourselves along with us. And it's really, really tough to get people to just trust that this practice is not going to make you look like you're an outsider looking in. It's actually going to make you more in depth so that you can control your situation. You want to control your destiny, and practice is going to help you with that.
Being intentional is being clear about what you need, and also knowing why, having the why. So I learned to practice gratitude, but having a why attached to it gives it so much more reality and power. So I mean, like, oh my goodness, I got these beautiful flowers the other day, and they so much matched the painting on my wall. And so I'm so grateful that I was able to get that. But why? And why? Because it's not something I take for granted. I didn't have to pay for it. It saved me. I got such beauty of God's creation for free. It just enhances the whole environment of my space. So, attaching a why to your intention gives it a deeper connection to who you are. Do you have a question, Judith?
Comment on what both of you just said, Antoine and you, Shirley, that most of life is really consistency and working toward growth. And in order to do that, you have to make oops, sorry, my phone is ringing. Just 1 second. And my watch is ringing too. Okay, so one of the things is, making a commitment as of what, I'm speaking about myself. I have to think about what I want to do. I can't do everything, but if there's certain things that I am going to really be committed to, it has to be around consistency.
Sure.
And that's where the growth is. And I always have to think about, okay, along with consistency is maturity. And, it's like with your faith, growing in faith is a practice.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's step by step. If you don't do that, you're not going to grow in faith.
Right.
And so I was just, connecting that to what you were saying as far as the monthly meetings. If this is something that is connected to people in there. So I just found out about this from my sorority.
Nice.
Are these meetings once a month?
Yes. Trainings are always once a month, every second Saturday of the month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just found out, so I'm going to try to put this on my agenda because I think this is really good. So anyway, that's all. I just wanted to comment on
So
that.
yeah, having clear intention so people know where you're coming from. They don't like scratching it. What's going on here? Like, be direct and clear about your intentions. If I'm going to next week, I have an appointment for the first time with the acupuncturist. And so if I go in there and say, well, I just want to feel better. No, I have my intention is that you do this in this number of, times. Well, that was established before the first appointment, but I had made my intentions clear about what I wanted, see if she could meet my expectations. And so being intentional, if you go out the door and, you want to exercise for health reasons, maybe you want to be intentional about that with yourself and say, okay, I'm going to start with 10 minutes because I haven't been exercising, but my intention is to build myself up to 30 minutes. And so every day you go out the door, you're knowing what your intention is ultimately. You know what your purpose is, where you go, why you're going out there and why you're walking.
Hey,
So
Shirley.
Important.
Hey, Shirley, can I propose something just for food for thought? So I just wanted to say, I'm going to turn my video just to make sure that I have I just wanted to bring it up Because we talk about this a lot, even going back to like slave days, and certain folks living in specific generations of our civilization, and how something is educated rather than an actual expression. So for example, if somebody has hatred for somebody, they learn that hatred rather than it being something that they're born with, right? I bring that up because I do Uber from time to time, and I get a chance to meet a lot of people that I don't know from Adam. And the best thing that I use Uber as is a networking tool. So I network with people based on what genre of profession they're in to help me in my quality of life or with an organization I'm with. For example, sickle cell. So I've ran into, over a month's time, I ran into about 6 or 7 people that live in different parts of the country that are actually a part of departments in their hospitals for sickle cell patients. And one of the things that I want to propose, and I wanted this to be understanding because you talked about clear intentions. Most of the time when people want to be doctors and want to be nurses, it's not their intention to be prejudiced. Right. It's their intention to help people. It's just the education that they're receiving doesn't allow them to be equipped to understand where that person might be coming from, because that's not the protocol of becoming a nurse or a doctor. It's love. We want you to understand parts of the body. We're not trying to get you to understand parts of the mind. You get what I'm saying? So with that being said, how does that tie into what you were talking about earlier about how having an opportunity to control your situation? Because a lot of times, people that go into a hospital situation, it's either an action they commit to somebody or a response that they get that really turns everything upside down. And it's not that person's intention to come in there and just tell you what you need. It's that person's intention. First of all, it's like, damn, I got somebody in here. I need to help. I got to figure out how to help this person. So getting upset with that person or not having the right response to that person could cause that person to have this controlled prejudice that just starts to build up because they just don't see their relationship working with yours. Is that like in your situation where you're like, I'm looking at this doctor, he's just not equipped for me. This is not for me. But it's not a reason for me to take all of this out on him or her personally. It's this protocol that they followed that doesn't equip them properly. Does that, am I making sense in that respect and how that ties into this conversation?
I think so. Being accepting the reality and having intention about how to respond to it kind of also can tie in together. But every situation, especially in the sense of a crisis situation or something that things are running high, emotions, when you're in pain, you're stressed, and a lot of the cortisol is up, and so that blocks your limbic, which means that your reasoning mind is kind of going in shutdown mode. So a lot of things can throw a monkey wrench in that. But in as much as in you lie, applying these principles will work for you, and you'll start to become masterful or better and better at them, which always is going to work for your benefit.
Yeah, because when I ask those people, like, what is their intention for being in the medical field, their first answer always is, I want to help somebody. I want to make a change. I want to be the best person for somebody rather than feel like it's all about myself. And that's why I just bring that up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a lot of people start off with clear intentions, but circumstances, systems, bureaucracies can cloud out those things. So you see people starting off in ministry and medicine with clear, good intentions that kind of go wayward for different reasons. But we can own our own intention, and we can't control other people. If we're clear on our intention and express them, that works for us.
Makes sense.
I also think that, go ahead, Judith, you have your hand up. I think that some of the things
quick. I just want to mention too that I do think that sometimes, especially, I don't want to sound like I'm stereotyping at all, but especially people who go into the nursing field, a lot of times they really do have a great deal of care and concern for people, as well as wanting to, of course they want to help people, but they have a certain amount of real compassion, I think, as well. Because sometimes when I go to the doctor, I can start feeling better just from checking in with the nurse, you know, getting my vitals checked, and you know, just from them really caring about how I'm doing.
And I think that's a
So-
learning experience that can create future intention. So you had that experience, like, oh, that worked well. Let me be intentional about applying that. I can use that as a model for me to apply to other situations going forward. So that's moving in intention. So now, because of our time, we've been really interactive, which is awesome. But
I just want to say something.
In a couple of
think-
minutes. So,
I think Stephanie had her hand up.
oh, okay, Stephanie. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you. I am very interested in the clear intentions. I work for Access Advocacy as a certified medical advocate for sickle cell patients, which is a program where sickle cell patients advocate for sickle cell patients. And in building this program, one of the things that we have come to see is that by taking for granted why we're doing the things we do has directly created some of the problems that we have in healthcare. We assume, oh, we've been doing this for years, decades, whatever it is. We don't have to put a name to why we do this. But we are finding that, yes, in order to get in there and break those stereotypes and all of those things, we need to specifically tell staff, this is our standard of care. This is why we do this. When we do this, this happens. When you do this, this happens. And be clear, and it is in our patient profile. All of that when I'm in the hospital, what is my sleep pattern? What do I talk in my sleep? Very, very clear. And it takes away the guesswork from the staff and the ability for them to say, oh, they're just doing it because they're lazy or because whatever. No, now you know why we're doing this.
Right.
So I really love this.
And Stephanie, what you're talking about also ties into the 8th step that I'll be talking about, assertiveness, which is basically saying, so that you see how all of these tie in. So I really appreciate everybody's valuable input and questions, because it's not going to mean anything unless it means something to you and you can see how it can work in your life, in each of our lives. And so before we break, I'm gonna cover one last item and then we'll pick up and
take as much time through this last item as you want, Shirley.
oh, okay. This is boundaries, and I think a lot of people have misconceptions about boundaries because we need to have boundaries, like in relationships. It's kind of, where's the beginning of me and the end of you? And so we kind of can get enmeshed and own stuff that doesn't belong to us, like other people's emotions, and we'll talk about that too. But boundaries are not to be a brick wall, they're to be a door that you control the knob of, and you can open and close as you find appropriate. But you're the one who controls the opening and closing. It's not a wall to shut down. It's not to try to control somebody else, but only what is yours. And in setting boundaries, we need to be clear about what is ours and what's not. And so even in the sickle cell arena, it's also applicable in terms of breaking away from some of the tendencies that some of us might have for people pleasing or wanting to be part of the crowd. I know that was a real challenge for me growing up, and I still have to be conscious about it. But I used to go into a crisis because I just wanted to be like everybody else. I didn't have good boundaries for myself. And so I would allow myself to do things that I knew better just because I didn't want to be different. But I needed to accept that and set those boundaries just out of self-respect and honoring myself, and being able to accept that reality and maximize the areas I could maximize it. So setting boundaries is also letting people know, like I have a male friend, and so I had to make it clear to him that I had clear boundaries on, he's a night owl. I try to be to sleep between 10 and 10:30. So we can't be on the phone past 10 o'clock or doing things, it's with rare exception. So that's a boundary. And you want to let that be known, because then you might get a little edgy if you've been letting slide, and then all of a sudden 3 months later, I actually go to bed at 10 o'clock. That's not such a good idea. You want to make it clear from the beginning and set those boundaries, not being a little, militant type military person. These are the rules and blah, blah, blah. But, in a human, caring, respectful way, at the appropriate time, as early as possible, you want to establish some boundaries. If before those boundaries are established, you start to feel like they're being crossed, then you want to kind of nip it in the bud in a respectful way, giving people the benefit of a doubt that they're not intentionally trying to do anything hurtful towards you, but letting your needs be known and setting those clear boundaries, not only setting them towards other people, whether it's financial, whether it's energy, whether it's time, whether it's space, just be clear about what you need to do to be self-honoring, and be intentional about sharing that with the people as they come into your life as appropriate.
I also want to just chime in, Shirley, and say that I think your delivery has a lot to do with whatever it is that you're saying, because two people could say the same thing, but deliver it differently, and then it's received differently. So, I think delivery is definitely a key element when you're trying to convey, like you said, you don't want to come off all militant or whatnot, but you just want to make certain that everybody is clear. And I think I said that last week in the support group. I always try and make certain that when I leave a conversation, or when I'm having a conversation, that I'm clear and I'm direct. And that's why I always tell people, try not to wear your feelings on your sleeve, because my tact is not that good. But I have to get it, you want to get it out there and let people know so that they're clear about who they're dealing with.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so, like I have friends, they like to go hiking. So I have to set a boundary for myself and let them know that I can't do inclines. So if we're going someplace with inclines, I have to pass, or I just picnic down at the bottom of the hill, whatever. But you have to make that clear. You don't want to show up and then all of a sudden say, "Oh, I can't go up that hill." You want to be clear. And I so much, Adina, appreciate what you're saying, because it's really so much. You don't want to be reactive. You want to be responsive or proactive and assertive. And we'll talk about assertiveness compared to aggressiveness and passive aggressive and all these other things. But you want to be clear and set boundaries so that you're always taking good care of yourself, and you're being really respectful of the other person by disclosing those boundaries instead of reacting to them like they can read your mind and they should know, which is never the case. And be graceful, be respectful. So I could just say, for example, my male friend, to let him know that I'm not going to talk on the phone past 10, and say, "Oh, I have so much fun talking to you. I'm kind of an early bird person, and I just really value my sleep so much. So I just want you to know that we can talk as much as we want. I just want to make sure that we do it so that I can get to bed by 10. Does that work for you?" "Oh, sure. Cool." So we got an understanding. So you can do it nicely, politely, respectfully, giving the person the grace, the benefit of a doubt. And if it's not, like say, my friend's name is Billy, say he calls me at 10 o'clock and I'll say, hey, Billy, or I just won't answer the phone because I already told him, but I can pick it up and say, hey, Billy, you know, it's 10 o'clock. I'm just getting ready to go to bed. How about what time is good for me to call you tomorrow? You know, that kind of thing. Well, you know, people, you don't have to argue with them to be something they're not. And so you accept that reality and have the paradox of making a choice not to have them in your life or position them in a certain way that is not harmful, that's safe for you mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, physically, in every way. So allow the reality of what you see to speak truth to you, and give yourself the honor to believe it and respond appropriately.
I'm not saying that's always easy.
No,
It gets easier as I get older.
right.
And sometimes it's very hurtful. Sometimes I'm hurt because I don't want to see it the way it really is, and I have to pray about it and all kinds of stuff. But in the long run, it's better.
And that's and I like the phrase you use, see it the way it really is, because that is kind of where I was going with acceptance. Please, 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 it's not being a doormat, it's not resigning yourself, it's not being helpless or hopeless, it's being seeing things how they really are. Like being aligned with reality. So before I move on to the next one, any questions or comments on that? Okay. So
I have a
now,
question or a comment.
sure.
You know how you said actions speak louder than words? Like, but I don't know if I'm saying this right, but like, say, like, when a person is going through something and they're not sure if another person can handle it, like, yes, you should always speak louder. You should always, make your voice heard and things like that. But I don't know if it's just me, but do other people feel like burdens to other people when they try to, like, make, I don't know how to explain it, but like, I don't know how to get it out, but like, does other people feel like burdens when they're trying to make their self heard and make sure they're advocating for themselves and make sure their actions are speaking, louder than their words? But does that come off, or does anybody else feel like a burden to other people? Do you guys just kind of keep to yourselves when it comes to things like that, or like, how do you handle that, Ms. Shirley?
Well, it is, I gave you the example about me, younger, wanting to be normal. And I even kind of find subconsciously that I can even slip into that realm, even in this phase of my life. Like last month, a friend of mine called me. I have a membership at the Arboretum, and I was feeling a little off, but it was a gorgeous day. And I'm like, we're not going to do anything like exertion causing. So she's like, hey, meet me at the Arboretum. I said, cool. Like, it's 5-minute drive from my house. But that was a bad decision. Honestly, it turned out not to be a good decision. So you can slip into that mode of wanting to be a part of it, or not honoring what you really need for yourself at the moment. When you feel like a burden to someone else, if that energy is emanating from them, you want to examine, is that me or is that them? If it's them, if you can make that distinction, am I just kind of like a little, I'm sorry, I think that's my delivery for real this time. Excuse me for 1 second.
Here's my question to you guys. Like, at what point in time do you, let's take the term burden. What makes somebody or you feel like you could be a burden? So I try to understand the idea behind that. Like, what would make you feel like you're a burden in that respect?
Like when like just telling somebody how you feel, I guess, or just telling somebody that you don't feel good, or like them trying to understand you can go from being fine 1 minute to the next, and say you guys are supposed to go somewhere and you don't want to go anymore because you feel, you don't feel good. Like, or you're out somewhere with friends and they're all having fun and you're trying to hide that you're not feeling good because you don't want to burden them. Like I had an example to where the conference that was held in 2019 in San Diego, I went out with a couple of friends and it was one of my friend's birthday. I didn't want to be a burden and say I didn't feel good because I was the only one that didn't feel good when everybody else was having fun. Like, so I just kept it to myself, and I didn't want to come off and seem like a burden, or I didn't want people to be like, oh, she's always that person that doesn't feel good, or she's always that person that doesn't want to do anything. But then if you wait too long, and something really happens, then people are like, well, why didn't you say something? So it's kind of like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, I feel like, because you have those people who are always getting on you about, dang, like you're always so negative, or like you're always in the hospital, or all you talk about is doctor stuff or things like that. But then when you stop talking to those people, then you're wrong, because all they hear from you is you being sick or what you're dealing with. They don't look at it as these are things that you're going through that you have to deal with every day. They just get tired of hearing it, but they don't realize that it's something that you're physically going through every single day.
Yeah.
They just get tired of hearing it.
Can I
They don't
answer
actually
that?
have to experience it.
Can I answer that?
You sure can, Stephanie.
So one of the things we are taught as children, and I don't know if it's always that we were taught it or that we pick up on it. One, we are very good empaths usually, but one of the reasons why medical professionals have such a hard time believing us is because we are very stoic when it comes down to our pain. And we learned that as children, because if we let people see how we hurt, it upsets them. So to keep from upsetting them, we started learning how to be stoic about it. As far as
Yeah,
the
like
situation you're describing, yes, I think that there are people who just don't understand, but you have the right to have the conversation with them and draw a line, because there are people out there who can understand and can come and walk alongside you through this journey. You don't have to stay with people that tell you you're always being negative, because you have an illness. That's a fact. And it seems like there's a little bit of a lack of understanding from their standpoint. Like if you're always in the hospital, you're not going there to have fun.
Right.
This is serious. This is your illness, and you have the right to have people around you. You can make your community of people around you that will support you and come alongside you and who won't have those reactions. You can do that. You can make that. There's so many groups and stuff out there. You can make that.
And that kind of ties into some of the things we talked about: respect, trust, acceptance. That's for yourself as well as
Yeah.
other people. So it's a two-way street. So we talked about the intention. And so we need to prepare the people in our circles like, okay, this might happen. And you can choose based on their response, whether with what position they need to play in your life, and we'll talk about positions. So some of the things that we're going to talk about cover also that, Jackie. I totally get that. It's hard. You don't want to be the party pooper or the you know, the downer, all that kind of thing that you might stigmatize yourself as, or maybe other people too. But if we are intentional and clear up front and lay some boundaries and get understanding in the early stages of the relationship and get better and better by practicing that, then we'll find ourselves getting higher levels of respect from others and for ourselves, and better and better relationships and responses. Before we
You
move
should
on,
never. I just wanted to chime in and say, Jackie, you should never feel like you're a burden, because they just don't understand. And if that's how they make you feel, depending on whoever these people are, and I don't know how long your relationships have been with them, then them are not the people that you need to be hanging out with.
Right.
I'm not
hard when it's
saying
your
you
own
need.
family.
Well, yeah, okay then. So, right, but don't allow them to make you feel like a burden.
and we're
You
going to
have
talk about that too.
lines and boundaries too, you know, and they have to respect that. See, now we're back to that disrespect. See, that's not right. So I'm going to let Shirley go forward, but don't
And
feel
you
like a
can make-
burden, please.
You can make a family. You don't have to, family doesn't always have to be blood. And if you have family members that are blood that are making you feel that way and you can't remove them from your life, then find other family members that you make members of your family, members of the sickle cell community, members of any other community you want to choose, them your family.
And that kind of, we part of what we're going to talk about too touches on that, which is assertiveness, compassion, and surrounding yourself with people with compassion, we can be our own worst enemies and critics and hard on ourselves. So it's important to exercise compassion, but we'll touch on that. But we are, we haven't covered a lot. And I'm not sure how we should proceed, because I don't think we're with the interaction we're having, which is beautiful and dynamic and enriching, we're not going to finish. So I don't know whether you want to kind of speed through some things and save the questions for last.
Keep rocking, girl.
Okay. All right. So the next would be that we want to own our own emotions and not theirs. And so an example of not owning your own emotions is saying, "You made me mad." Well, that's a reaction and not a response. So if we take a pause between something that might trigger us and how we want to respond to that, a response is a more thoughtful way of giving feedback as opposed to reaction or blaming somebody else or giving them ownership over your emotions. I'm not saying that people can't do things that upset us. That's human nature. But as much as possible, we want to reel it in, own our own emotions, come to the realization that we actually have a choice, and choice is powerful. And the other thing is we don't want to own other people's emotions. Like, I'm afraid to make them upset. You know, of course, if you act ugly and crazy, that's one thing. But if somebody is going to get upset because you have to leave the party because you're going into a crisis or you feel like you're at risk for one, and they're going to get upset about it, you can't own that emotion. That's an extra burden on you that you don't really, that's not yours to carry. People are going to respond and react to different ways that may be unfavorable or undesirable, but that's not for us to own. And so that makes it easier for us. It makes us better mentally and emotionally healthy, not to own other people's emotions. You don't want to hurt anybody on purpose. You don't want to disregard them, but they need to process that out themselves. You can talk about it. I'm not saying you ignore them, but that's the process that they have to go through. We have to process our own emotions. We can have compassion and comfort, but ultimately, your emotions are your emotions and their emotions are their emotions. And so we don't need to feel bad about it or feel like we have to sacrifice ourselves to make them feel better. You know, we want to have compassion, respect, grace, but let people own their emotions and work through their process so that you can take care of yourself.
Karen has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No
Karen?
worries.
Who had their hand up?
Maybe she took
Oh,
it
no,
down.
that was me before. Sorry.
Okay,
We're-
no
good.
worries. Thank
Okay. So the next thing is compassion, and I kind of briefly touched on that. And I just want to really clarify what compassion is. Compassion is it's more than empathy. It's definitely not pity, but it means caring about someone else's struggle. Not just like, oh, I'm so sorry, oh, poor you. No, compassion is saying, oh, that must be hard. How can I help? Compassion leads to action. And also, more importantly, self-compassion. And so if you're going through a thing, a very good friend of mine, her birthday was last month. I wasn't feeling great. I was going through something. And we always really do something special for each other, acknowledge it. And it just got away from me. I just didn't have it in me. And so when I caught myself getting ready to beat up on myself, I was like, oh, you know, I'm going to talk to me like my best friend. And that's what compassion is. Hey, girl, you weren't feeling so. That's your friend. She gets it. You've been showing up all these years. You'll have an opportunity later. It could be okay to have a belated or next year, but it's all good. You did take. Having compassion for others is leaning towards their suffering and taking action. And that doesn't mean just offering them a prayer, giving them encouraging words, holding their hand. Acts of compassion. Anybody have any questions or comments on compassion? Where'd I go? Okay, here we go. All right, let's move on to personal growth and relationships. I'm not talking about something we necessarily ask or require of the other person, but for us to present ourselves as a healthy person, whether it's work, family, friends, and any kind of relationship, the more whole we are, the more we are from self-aware, the more we are growing within ourselves holistically, the more we bring to the table, the more we pull out the best of other people. So it adds to a very healthy relationship. We can communicate our needs with greater confidence. We can be our best advocate and our best friend and have compassion. The more we grow, become self-aware, and part of that personal growth is also being more self-accepting. Self-awareness, and I kind of touched on that in terms of personal growth, but self-awareness means feeling what you feel, being in touch with your emotions, being in touch with your needs, understanding who you are. And we all have blind sides that can't see, a friend can bring to our attention. But for the most part, as we observe what happens in our bodies when certain circumstances show up, how do we feel? Do we find ourselves holding our breath under certain circumstances? Do we find ourselves in environments that keep us smiling? These are things we need to observe, be our own witness, so we become more self-aware. The more we are more self-aware, the more self-care, the more we are able to be our own best friend and advocate and be able to show up in relationships in a way that works better for us. Do you have anybody have any questions or thoughts or feedback on to add to that about self-awareness?
I would say that just because being in this process of an organization that's trying to rally people from all walks of life to really engage is a tough situation sometimes, when there's always an excuse that can be used. And it's not necessarily being non-compassionate to oneself. It's just taking the opportunity to speak to yourself and think for a minute, okay, look, right now, I just don't like the situation that I'm in currently right now. Let me give myself every opportunity possible to put myself in the positive, to push out the positive energy and get that same energy back. And not taking a little bit of time to at least discuss this with yourself is definitely a detriment for everybody. This is a part of what we talk about with health, with mental fitness. You know, not everybody's going to be able to help you from the outside looking in. So it's going to take a lot more, fortitude from your own self to practice talking to yourself and being your own personal best friend. It's the toughest thing to really do. Like, I really don't, I just like when people feel a burden to another person, it's like, okay, well, shoot, forget him. I'll be fine all by myself. But not everybody has the courage. They can muster the courage to do that. And I think self-awareness starts to brandish the courage that you need in order to take these strides in your life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because when you become more self-aware, you are in touch with your strengths and your weaknesses, your good qualities and the ones that need to be tweaked a little bit.
Exactly.
But you're still accepting yourself. You're not condemning yourself. You're not damning or shaming yourself. You're not criticizing yourself. You're not judging yourself. It's like, oh, okay. So it's a curiosity. You come with a spirit of curiosity, a spirit of learning. Oh, I just realized this about myself. That's interesting. So I can turn this around. I can take some steps, because becoming self-aware is empowering. You don't want people to say, do you realize how you're acting?
Yeah. Exactly.
Did you really say that?
Yeah. And I think everybody pretty much on this call can attest. I'm 38 years old, and trust me, what does everybody do when they get to a certain age? Like, damn, if I knew this 10 years ago, how much better I would be, or how much, what position. We always have that situation. It's like, damn, well, 10 years ago, you could have tried to be self-aware. You just didn't want to try it at that time. But yeah, I dig it. I dig it. I'm always telling myself, damn, I wish I would have known this 5 years ago. Dang, I would have known this 10 years ago. Dang, I wish I would have practiced this much earlier.
Becoming self-aware also leaves you less vulnerable to you being used, abused, manipulated. You know yourself. Somebody can't tell you who you are. Okay. So the next one is being assertive. And we kind of touched on that. And I just want to, a lot of the situations we discussed call up the need to be assertive, which means to speak on your behalf, to speak up, don't hold it back. But your assertiveness is always respectful. It's not aggressive, like, let me tell you something. No, you don't go there. You're like, I need to share this with you. It's really important that we understand, is this a good time to talk about it or whatever? But you need to let yourself be known, come out of the closet, show up and express what you feel, what you need, what you like, what you don't like. A lot of people are really good about saying what they don't like. I don't like this, but be in touch with really what activates joy in you, peace in you, and share that. Be assertive on more of the positive things, so people know who know you for what you like and who you are. And so becoming self-aware helps you to express that through assertiveness all the more. Because when you're clear about who you are, then you can tell people, this is me, this is how I roll, this is what I like. These are, my strengths at appropriate time. I mean, you're not going to just sit down and give a tick list, but making people clear about who you are, and what you like, what you don't like. You always want to start off with what you like and be positive. Positivity is a common denominator in good relationships. Positivity, consistency, and vulnerability. And that could be a whole nother talk unto itself. But vulnerability is meaning just being real, doing you. That means showing up and taking off the mask with safe people. And that when you open the door like that with someone who has earned your trust, we talked about trust, and who you trust, they can trust you, then you can be more open, be more vulnerable. And that I find the more I open up, show my warts and flaws and all, the more it opens up other people to do the same. And that means you go closer in emotional and mental intimacy. You're trusting, the bond is getting tighter because you're showing up and you're doing you, not trying to play role somebody else. You're taking off the mask. You do it at the appropriate time when it's safe. Any thoughts or comments? Okay, and we just kind of touched on daring to be vulnerable. And I don't think I need to add to that. Just basically not being afraid to say I'm scared, or with the right people who won't take advantage or you've already established trust. But being vulnerable, like, oh yeah, I always kind of had a reaction to that, or I don't like monster movies or whatever, or even just in a positive way, in my relationship with Billy, he, for us to go close, I have to be vulnerable. I have to say, you are so special in this kind of way. I haven't, blah, 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 whatever. Just being open, and it's risky. But if you always want to play it safe, you won't close bonds.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any thoughts about vulnerability? Any concerns about it? Any confusion about it? Any dread for it?
We good. I think.
And so this is the last point on this particular issue, and I'm going to run through some other things real quick. But this is the last point on the basics of a relationship, what I referred to earlier about positions, roles, and places. And so everybody in your life doesn't need a front row seat. And you need to decide what position and what role and what place they are. I had a friend, I don't know if you want to call it a friend, an acquaintance, and she was a commissioner, and she needed someone to go to all these places that she would get free tickets to, plays and shows. I'm like, I'm good. I'll play that role. And she needed just a companion to go to these events with. Our relationship was nothing more. If I got sick, I couldn't call on her. For anything else, our relationship was very narrow, and it was for me to accompany her to all these free things that she had tickets to. I would get the free ticket too, but it would be clear. We're clear who we are to each other, so our expectations would be lined up with that. And to have that intention and clarity from the beginning avoids a lot of confusion and hurt feelings down the road. So if it's not made clear, then how they show up and what they're showing you by their action lets you make the decision. You have choice of what role, position, or place they need to be situated in your life. Whether they need to be someone that is, you love them from a distance, but kind of have very little contact, whether they need up close and personal or confident. You need to decide the positioning of the people in your life that's appropriate for how they're showing up and who they are, what you need, what their expectations and your expectations are in that relationship. So that wraps up the basics. I wanted to kind of give you some quick warnings, tips, hard truths, and some more specifics about disclosure in relationships about our sickle cell condition. Okay. And I think I'd mentioned that these positivity, consistency, and vulnerability are the icing on the cake to really enjoy great relationships. So let's see. These are some extra considerations for romantic relationships.
You go back to that slide, please, the other slide, just real quick,
Sure.
the one you just did. I want to take a picture of it. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Real quick, Shirley,
Judith,
real quick. Oh, Nadine, go ahead, tell her.
Judith, I just wanted to tell you, you will get the presentation. We will send you the presentation, Judith. Just,
Oh, okay, thank you.
yeah, you will get this. Okay.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay. So we'll talk about a little bit about romantic relationships. And they do take on a little different flavor. For all romantic relationships, I think it's really clear for you before we go into a situation, uncompromisingly knowing our value, not feeling like we're not good enough just because we have sickle cell. I mean, everybody has different issues and everybody has preferences. Some people may prefer to be in relationship with someone with sickle cell. Some people may not. That's them. It has nothing to do with your value or your worth. It just means you're not compatible. It's as simple as that. Don't take it any other way. You're valuable and you deserve a meaningful, respectful, honorable relationship, whether it's romantic, friendship, or any other. Never minimize your value because you have sickle cell or anything else. So you have to have your standards too. You don't just like not all comers. You want to know what your wants are, like what your must-haves and can't stand. I can't stand somebody hard on sarcasm. So that's like a deal breaker. That's just my personality. I'm not saying it's good or bad. For me, it doesn't work. I can't stand cigarette smoke. And that's a deal breaker. I can't have anybody around me smoking. So, you know, those are just some examples. I must have someone who's kind. Kindness is like mandatory for me. So you find out what you must have and what you can't stand. And then if you have that clear, then it makes it easy going forward. Know what your core values are, see if there are any major clashes. And that's very individual. There's no class on this. Once you know your core values, someone's core values could even be different. I mean, for some people, their religion is a real core value. But I've seen a Christian and a Muslim get married and be happy. And they were very committed to their faith. So it's just really no hard and fast rule, but you can kind of like be tuned into that for yourself. And like I said, don't forget, you get to choose. You get to choose. Don't be so, hey, oh, they chose me. You get to choose. So don't be swept away for being chosen. You are not desperate. And you also, excuse me. You want to look at it as an adventure, an exploration, and an opportunity, not only to discover more about yourself and your potential partner, but more about how relationships work. And it's good to practice. You always have a lot of practice opportunities. And there are so many different types of people and personality in the world. So you could look at it as a great adventure and not a be all and end all. on a romantic level. Let's see. If you reach out and initiate a relationship and it's not reciprocated, like I said, it's not rejection, it's just good information. It just probably means you're just not compatible. And they may have known that before you, but in any case, it's not about you. So don't take it personally. If they don't like you, it's just that you're not compatible with them. And there are people compatible with you in the romantic arena. I, you know, have had different degrees of challenges during sickle cell, and I have dated a whole lot. I've been married twice. Sickle cell never seemed to be a factor in my relationships, as far as, no, I don't want to have anybody with sickle cell. That never seemed to be a factor. I maybe once, I was dating this guy for a very short time, and then I had a crisis, and he kind of started acting weird. He didn't say it, but I took it that he couldn't handle it. But that was once, and I'm 66 years old, and I've done a lot of dating and things like that. And so I don't think we need to be concerned about that being an issue, either they're compatible or not. I always try to disclose, and we'll talk about that as soon as, if the relationship looks like it's got some traction and it might be going somewhere, or emotions are starting to really get involved, then, you know, when you sense that, that would be a good time to disclose, and I'll talk about that. And in any relationship, no one can be all things to you. No one can make you happy. It's your job. And that's where we talked earlier about personal growth, self-awareness, self-respect, self-compassion. Those kinds of things are things that you can bless yourself with. It's your job to find out what brings you joy, contentment, and gratification, and then have that fulfilled not only with yourself, but multiple sources, friends, family, whoever, not just a romantic partner, because that's going to be an impossible task. Lastly, with no judgment or criticism, because you're adding to the capacity to be a walking wounded if you dramatize things that don't turn out the way you wanted it to or expected it to. So for example, say I was married and my ex-husband had an affair. So I could walk around for the rest of my life talking about that dog. He went out with that hussy and he ain't no good. He betrayed me. He lied, cheated, and this and that and the other. And then I'm all wounded. He's out having a good time. I'm dragging this bag around with me. Or I could just simply state the facts. I was married. We had an agreement to be faithful. He broke the agreement, so it didn't work. I moved on. Period, paragraph, end of story. So we make stories. We can choose the story we make. And sometimes being aware of that can save us a lot of grief, pain, and we should get to choose. Speaking I languages versus sounding like attack. And so when you have an issue in your relationship, in any relationship, really, you don't want to say, well, you did this and you. It's better to say something like, I felt dismissed when you said these words. So you speak about how it made you feel. You're speaking from an I place. That way you have a better chance of being heard rather than making them get on the defensive and want to get in a back and forth argument and attack mode. And this is part of number 7, is part of that self-awareness thing. You're going to reflect on your patterns, what assumptions and views of yourself maybe need to be challenged, updated, eliminated, because they can limit you. So becoming more and more self-aware and reflecting on how you're reacting or responding to situations. is really a growth tool and enhances who you are, how you show up, and what you attract. One of the things too, especially for females, is I think it's better to take a body neutrality attitude, which is, you know, we're so in our capitalistic, materialistic society, you need this in order to be gorgeous. Well, a body position would be to say, everybody's so different. Look at God's creativity. They're short, tall, skinny, fat, whatever. It's not judge. It's just like, oh, different. No bad, no good, just different. And that just kind of takes a lot of weight off of you. And so the less judgment we have to feel like we make, the easier it is we're actually making it for ourselves. And I'm not saying all of these things take practice, because we can be so on automatic pilot, so conditioned and programmed to automatically fall into a certain process. But when you start practicing it, like I've started practicing that. So when I start to get judgmental, I see somebody and I make a negative judgment, I catch myself and like, oh, it's just different.
Mhm.
You know, so the last thing on that to wrap that part up is just the more you are, the more you get. The more you give, the more you get. That's a return on investment. So the more you respect yourself, have compassion for yourself and others, the more you honor yourself and others, the more you radiate that energy and draw it towards you, and you're more attractive in your unseen realm, because you can get a vibe. You know, everybody's gone in a room to a party, to an event or whatever, and you kind of like sense that darkness or negative energy, or just really, oh, this is a real positive, joy-filled space. You just feel it. And we have like a invisible radar screen around us that gives us that sense. So don't discount it. Pay attention. Okay. Any comments, thoughts, questions? Okay. I wanted to just kind of like get some hard truths that we'll talk about real quick. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. As Antoine said, they'll be in the handout, and I think they'll speak for themselves. But these are things we just need to constantly remind ourselves of. We all know it, but you can't change the essence of a person. You know, if you get married to somebody, say, well, I'm going to start making him be a cleaner person and pick up after himself, forget about it. I mean, don't count on it. You're lucky if you do, but it's better if you know they're messy, that you have to just adjust and say, well, I'll have to do some extra cleaning. But to hound them and expect, you know, I'm just using that example, but I mean, some people are just flexible and more accommodating. They have that capacity.
Yeah.
But it's all about capacity and noticing that sometimes people don't do things not because they're mean, or not because they don't like you, not because they don't want to. They just don't have the capacity. They don't have it.
Mm.
And you teach people how to treat you. Number two, you get what you tolerate. So if you put up with it, then your unspoken rule is you can treat me any way you want and I'll take it. And forgiveness and grace add to love and trust. No one is perfect. No one ever will be perfect. And so we need to have so much forgiveness and grace, but we need to have the wisdom through experience, through trial and error, through past experiences, to know where to draw the line, where forgiveness and grace is appropriate. Forgiveness is always appropriate because it sets you free more than the other. Forgiveness, I think it was Desmond Tutu said, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And it's really true. But anyhow, moving on to number 5, this kind of like about risk. You know, the more you invest, the bigger return, and it requires some risk. And you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know how things are going to turn out. And we have to learn to be okay with disappointment without becoming bitter and hard-hearted. And the more we allow the reality of unknowns to be present in our life, the less our peace will be stolen, the less our joy will be stolen. You know, the more content we'll learn to be in the state that we're in. And like I mentioned early on the top, it's not about me, it's not about them, it's about us when you're in a partnership, romantic relationship. So like what works for the relationship? Not, I gotta have my way, he gotta have his way. What works for us?
Yeah.
And as much as that's not always gonna be accessible, but as much as possible, that's the most healthy mindset to have in romantic relationships. So I'm not going to go over these warnings. Let's see. But I'll tell you what, look at these 10 warnings and everybody, and I'll just take a minute to read them.
Mhm.
And I'll open it up for questions. If anybody has comments or questions on these 10 things that you definitely want to watch out for in a romantic relationship, because these are signs of real trouble and abuse. Even in females, I had a female friend, a woman who tried to make friends with me. And as we were getting acquainted, I started to see some of these things show up in our interaction. So I had to end that relationship.
I feel like all of these right here are all like energy drainers.
Mhm.
Like this
Right.
just drain your energy. Like, golly, do you not realize that you were sucking the energy out of me? Regardless of whether it's positive or not, it's just all of these situations, you know, inabilities to manage this because you have a certain mindset just makes everything around the two people that are sharing the relationship, whether it be partner or student or physician and so forth, it's just draining situations. Why would you want to be in a position to where you would continuously drain the energy so that you guys have no exuberance about what you're talking about or what you're trying to relate to? Oh man, it's a tough situation.
And it really is. And I can say for myself personally, the more I learned and grew and appreciated myself, became more self-aware, more self-compassionate, the further and further away these kinds of people would be in my atmosphere or my sphere. You know, I didn't attract those kinds of people, less and less. And I was in a place of, you know, in my earlier years, low self-esteem, low self-worth, you know, just looking for love in all the wrong places. And I was attracting these kinds of people. So when I grew and became more self-aware and self-loving and self-caring and those things, I didn't draw those kind of people. It's not like I had to whip them out of place. They didn't show up because I wasn't sending out that energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I must say, I still find myself attracting those kind of people. I do. And I just, you know, I mean, I don't entertain it disappointing to me. I still attract those. It's not as bad as it was in the past, but I still do, you know, so.
Well, they might show up in your life here and there. I'm not saying that they never show up in my life ever, but they don't have, but I can recognize it so quickly if they do get that far that they don't have a place.
Yeah, right. I don't give them a place. That's for
Right.
sure.
So it's
I have in the past, but I don't anymore.
right. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if we can kind of like bubble ourselves completely, but when I say I don't attract, I mean, I don't draw them into my space. They might show up and I'll recognize them instantly for who they are from just learning and growing and past experience. So they don't take a position or a foothold. But so I may have to correct that and say that they don't, not that they don't show up at all, but they don't take space.
And I want to ask a question. I'm in or it's a religious group actually, where there's a lot of personalities like that in the group. And I'm really upset because I'm just really seeing the truth. And I'm just wondering, like, should I just, I don't know. I mean, I'm probably getting off subject. But when you brought that up, I just saw that and I said, there's so many people with that type of personality in this group.
It's very unfortunate, but if it's a religious group, one of the things about what can be a contributing factor to what's potentially toxic religiosity is self-righteousness, in a sense of you're the in club, you're the out club, a lot of judgment, a lot of spiritual superiority, and none of that is healthy for anybody, and it doesn't accomplish the goals of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hindu, Buddhism. That's not the goal of any of those organizations or religious faiths. And so the problem comes when you start to think you're in and everybody else is wrong and out, and you have no grace and mercy and just judgment. And so that could be pretty toxic. Our country has, with the atmosphere that we're trying to overcome, the political division and all kinds of divisiveness, is a reflection of a cultural narcissism that has permeated our society, I think, at a higher degree than we've seen in our lifetime. And hopefully that too shall pass. But we have to take care of ourselves and follow the love. That's what, follow the love. So,
okay, well, thank you for that. That's a lot of, what's there, and it's hurtful to me. But anyway, I'll work it out.
yeah. So I'm going to wrap it up. I think we have time, hopefully. This will be the last little piece as far as dating and sickle cell. You feel like you're comfortable to disclose, when you feel it's safe and you can trust that person. Without waiting too long, when you see emotions start to get involved, you want to share that you have sickle cell disease, but you don't want to sound catastrophic or awfulizing it or anything. You just want to, and it takes practice. I had to practice this, and it takes practice, but it works beautifully. I say, I see that our relationship is starting to develop, and it looks like there's potential for this to really grow into something significant. And I said, what do you think? Yeah, I see that too. Okay, well, then I want to share something with you, because trust and respect and integrity are so important. And I want that to be part of the foundation of our relationship. So I need to share with you that I have sickle cell. Do you know anything about sickle cell? No. Well, I can share some things about it. And you just matter of factly kind of keep it simple, because if they go to the internet first, it's like, you got this life-threatening. So it's like, okay, sickle cell is a genetic blood disorder, and it can, manifest in these different kinds of ways. And for me, I have pain episodes. Sometimes I'll, blah, 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 blah. You don't want to get too deep right away, but just kind of an overview. And then say, so yeah, how do you feel about that? And they'll respond. And I'll ask them, do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? And you take it from there. And it's always worked like a charm for me.
Nice.
So that sums it up for me. Anybody have questions or thoughts?
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.